Every December, he came back, same lake, same silence, same stillness. No other animals dared cross his path. No hunter ever tracked him. The forest simply made room for him and waited. But this year, something changed. This year, someone else came back too. The first thing she noticed was the silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of a stillness so thick it pressed against her chest like fog. Clara hadn't planned to return. Not ever. Not after what happened. Not after the headlines. Not after the search parties had stopped calling her name. But something, some pull she couldn't name, had brought her back to the northern range after all these years. And as she stepped onto the snow-covered trail that curved toward the lake, she saw them. The paw prints. Huge. Deep. Precise. Still fresh. The last time Clara had seen the lake, she was 13. It had been frozen then, too, though in her memories, the ice gleamed brighter, like the forest around it had held its breath for just a moment longer. The silence now, as she stood on the edge of that same lake 20 years later, was deeper. Heavier. Like it remembered what she'd tried so hard to forget. She adjusted her scarf and stepped off the worn trail. No fresh human footprints. No birdsong. No motion. Except for the paw prints. Massive ones. Pressed clearly into the snow, leading from the edge of the trees toward the shoreline. Not wandering. Deliberate. Each step perfectly spaced, not like an animal hunting, but like something returning. She crouched beside one. Pressed her glove to the impression. It was at least 3 times the width of her palm. The snow at the center had slightly melted and refrozen. Recent. Within the last few hours. She followed them without hesitation. The lake opened like a sheet of pale glass, framed by black pines. A wide crescent-shaped clearing circled it, bordered by snow-laden underbrush. She remembered this place in fragments, sliding on the ice as a child, her father warning her not to get too close to the center. The air used to smell like pine sap and wood smoke. Now it smelled like nothing. Emptiness and frost. Then she saw him. At the far side of the clearing, near a crooked birch tree that had once marked the spot where her mother set up the old wooden bench, the bear sat. Massive. Still. Not drinking. Not foraging. Just waiting. Her breath caught. She froze mid-step. He didn't move. Didn't even look at her. His head was bowed slightly forward, his front paws planted like anchors in the snow. His fur was thick with frost and patches of snow, his back slightly hunched like the cold had lived in his body for too long. She knew that posture. Not aggression. Not alertness. Just patience. It was impossible. And yet, the moment she saw him, something deep in her chest stirred, not fear, but recognition. This wasn't a bear she'd seen once. This was the bear. The one from her last memory here. The one she and her brother used to wait for, from the window of the ranger station. The one her father warned them about, he comes back every winter. Like clockwork. The one who'd been there the day her brother disappeared. She whispered aloud before she even realized, "It's really you." His ears twitched. He turned his head, not abruptly, but slowly, like he already knew who he would find. Their eyes met across the clearing. There was no rush. No threat. Just snow. And the silence between a question and its answer. The last time Clara had stood here, her boots had been too big. Her coat had been red. Her brother, Sam, had been beside her, throwing pebbles onto the ice, trying to see which ones would crack the surface first. Then the storm came. And the shouting. And the searchlights. And the missing posters. No one ever found Sam. Only his coat, near the same birch tree the bear now sat beneath. Clara's knees nearly buckled, but she held herself upright. She took a step forward. The bear didn't flinch. Another step. And another. With each one, the air grew warmer, not in temperature, but in something deeper. The presence of memory pressing up from beneath the ice and snow, threading itself through every pine branch and frozen root. She stopped 10 paces away. Close enough now to hear the bear's breath, slow and even, fogging the cold air in soft clouds. He raised his head and looked directly into her. His eyes were not wild. They were ancient. And in them, Clara didn't see hunger. She saw recognition. He stood, slowly, massive paws crunching into the snow. The earth didn't quake. The air didn't shift. He turned. And began to walk away. Not back into the forest. Around the lake's curve, toward the trail she hadn't dared take in years. The path to the old ranger station. The one they'd closed after the accident. Clara hesitated. But only for a second. Then she followed. Not quickly. Not with fear. With something else. A pull she hadn't understood until now. The bear didn't look back. He didn't need to. Because he already knew, this time, someone had come back. Clara followed the bear's slow, deliberate path along the lake's edge, each step crunching in the snow. Her boots sank slightly into the powder, but the trail he left was unmistakable. He didn't rush, didn't stray from the path, and every so often, she'd glance up to find him pausing, as if making sure she was still behind him. The lake fell away behind them. And then the trees opened. The clearing was smaller than she remembered, more overgrown, more silent. But the shape of it was familiar. There, nestled beneath the drooping branches and snow-heavy boughs, stood the ranger station. Time had been both cruel and careful. The walls were weather-worn. The roof sagged in one corner. A shutter hung at an angle. But it was still there. Not crumbled. Just waiting. Like the bear. Like the forest. Like a memory frozen in place. Clara stood at the edge of the clearing and stared. She remembered this building as the heart of her childhood, long winters, warm fires, soup bubbling on the stove, her father reading reports by lantern light, and her brother sketching strange spirals on scraps of paper. She remembered sneaking up the stairs to the loft, the exact spot where she'd last seen Sam looking out the window, pointing to something in the woods. She never asked what he'd seen. And after he vanished, she never returned to ask. Until now. The bear stopped several yards from the porch, his breath fogging in thick clouds. He turned to her, lowered himself into a sitting position, and waited. Just like before. Clara stepped up onto the porch, the wood groaning under her weight, and tried the door. It was locked. But as her hand touched the knob, something shifted. A creak. A weight released. And the door slowly opened on its own. Inside, the air was colder than outside, but not lifeless. Dust floated like snowflakes in the slanting light. Everything was exactly as it had been left. A coat still hung by the door. A cracked ceramic mug sat on the table. The lantern still perched on the window ledge. It was like the space had folded in on itself, preserved by frost and silence. Her boots echoed on the wood as she moved through the room. She touched the back of the chair where her father used to sit. The cushion still had an imprint. She ran her fingers along the old map nailed to the wall, trails marked in red, certain ones crossed out, others circled in black. And near the hearth, she found it. A small wooden box. She knelt and opened it. Inside were Sam's drawings. Spirals. Circles. Pawprints drawn in a child's hand. One page had a rough sketch of the bear, unmistakable, even in crude pencil lines. It was labeled simply, "He waits." Another showed two trees with a path winding between them. And beneath it, in her brother's handwriting, "Only when we return together." Clara clutched the paper to her chest. Her breath hitched. Upstairs, the loft was almost untouched. The window was still cracked open, just as Sam had left it. On the floor, a small wooden toy, his favorite, a carved fox with one leg missing. And on the windowsill, something impossible. A smooth stone. Etched with a spiral. Exactly like the one her brother had once drawn in the snow the morning he disappeared. She picked it up. Held it to her palm. It was cold. And yet alive. Like it remembered being held before. Outside, she heard the bear rise. Not moving away. But shifting, like the moment had passed. She stepped back down the stairs, stone in hand. Out onto the porch. And there he stood, facing the trees again, his head tilted slightly as if listening. Then, slowly, he looked back at her, not as a warning, not as a gesture. But as a question. Was she ready? Was she really here to remember? She stepped off the porch and nodded once. Then followed him deeper into the forest. They passed the broken fence at the edge of the ranger grounds. Beyond it, snow covered what used to be a garden. And past that, the trail curved, not a main trail, not one on the map. She remembered it only faintly. A place they'd played once. A secret spot. Where Sam had whispered, "If I ever disappear, this is where I'll go." She thought it had been a joke. Now, the bear was leading her exactly there. The trees closed tighter. The path narrowed. And as she moved beneath the thick canopy, the snowfall faded. Light filtered through the branches in pale shafts, touching only certain spots, like the forest was choosing what to reveal. And in one of those glowing patches stood a stone. Half buried in snow. Small. Flat. Unmarked. The bear stopped beside it. Looked down. Waited. Clara stepped forward. Brushed the snow away. Beneath it, carved deep into the stone. Together. The wind shifted. Soft. Not cold. Just real. Carrying with it something she hadn't felt in years, forgiveness. The bear turned and walked back toward the ranger cabin. Not rushing. Not retreating. Just satisfied. Clara stood alone by the stone. And for the first time since she was a girl, she whispered her brother's name out loud. Sam. And the forest listened. Clara stood for a long time beside the stone, her breath rising in pale clouds, her fingers still pressed to the word etched in the granite, together. The spiral was in her mind now, not drawn, not seen, but remembered. A pattern she had traced years ago in the frost on the windowsill, copied from her brother's sketchbook, repeated until the lines felt like a heartbeat. She rose slowly. The bear was already gone. But he had left a trail. Not in paw prints. In patterns. Small broken branches. Spirals etched faintly into bark. A red string caught on the edge of a pine branch, one she recognized. It had belonged to Sam's coat. The deeper she walked, the the quieter the forest became. And yet, it wasn't empty. It was aware. The trees pressed close but didn't crowd. The snow muffled her steps but didn't conceal them. The whole world felt like it was tilting inward, pulling her towards something not new, but forgotten. Something waiting. She came to a fork in the trail. There were no signs. No markings. But she knew the right path. Because there, in the snow, were two sets of prints. The bear's. And a second, smaller, lighter, more human than animal, but not adult. Barefoot. No shoe tread. No boot tread. Just footprints. Like someone had walked ahead of her with no concern for the cold. Her heart picked up. The forest pressed in closer. Wind whispered overhead, and the trees creaked, not threatening, but old, tired, ancient. She followed the twin prints down the slope and found herself standing before something she couldn't explain. A clearing. Perfectly circular. Trees arched around it in a near dome. At its center, an old fire ring, stone-stacked, blackened by age, half-covered in frost. And beside it, leaning against a stump, was the bear. Not sitting. Not watching. Just waiting. This time, he didn't look at her right away. His eyes were fixed on the fire ring. Clara stepped into the circle slowly. The snow here was lighter, thinner. It melted faster. Warmer. She approached the fire ring and saw something buried within the stones, half frozen beneath the ash. A small object. She reached in, pulled it free. It was a metal pendant. Oval. Her brother's initials scratched into the back. She gasped. He never took it off. It had been a birthday gift from their mother the year he disappeared. How did it end up here? She turned to the bear. He was looking at her now. Head low. Eyes calm. Like he had all the time in the world. Like this was not the end of something, but the middle. The air changed. A whisper of sound moved through the trees. A chime. Faint. Not from metal. Like wind across glass. It circled the clearing once, then faded. But Clara heard something else with it, a memory. A voice. Sam's voice. If you follow the spiral, you'll always find your way back. She hadn't heard those words in 2 decades. But they rang clear now. She clutched the pendant. And dropped to her knees. The snow beneath her shifted. Softened. She dug quickly, her hands numb, her breath short. And there, just beneath the surface, more stones. Flat. Stacked in a ring. A second spiral. Larger. Wider. Old. Not natural. Made deliberately. Like a map. Or a gate. She looked at the bear. He stepped forward. Circled her once, slow, deliberate. Then stopped directly in front of her. Lowered his massive head. And from the loose fur beneath his jaw, something fell. A strip of red cloth. Tattered. Faded. It matched Sam's coat. Clara took it. And for a moment, everything around her went still. The wind. The trees. Her own breath. Still. Then a low hum began, not from the bear, not from her. From the ground. From the stones. Like the forest itself had exhaled. And then she saw it. Not with her eyes. With memory. Like something unlocking behind her ribs. She saw her brother in that clearing 20 years ago. Alone. Crying. The bear at his side. Not threatening. Protecting. leading him down a different trail, away from the storm, away from the men shouting in the woods, away from her and the porch and the floodlights. Leading him here. To this place. Where the spiral was drawn not just in snow, but in time. And then it faded. The vision passed. But the feeling remained. He had come here. He had been safe. He had chosen to stay. Clara rose. The bear stepped back, clearing the path. She turned. And there, at the edge of the clearing, stood a figure. Small. Thin. Wrapped in a pale coat. She couldn't see the face. But she knew the posture. Sam. Her breath caught. She stepped forward, heart pounding. But before she could reach him, the wind kicked up, a swirl of snow, a sudden brightness, and the figure was gone. Only the bear remained. Still watching. Still waiting. She didn't cry. Not yet. She simply whispered. "Thank you." And the forest, for the first time in 20 years, whispered back. Clara didn't chase the figure. She didn't cry out. Didn't run. Something in her bones told her it wasn't time. The forest wasn't cruel, only patient. Everything would come when it was meant to. And right now, the bear was waiting. Still beside the spiral. Still watching her with those quiet, impossibly old eyes. She turned back to the spiral of stones. The pattern wasn't just familiar, it was intentional. Sam had drawn spirals as a child because they were already here, etched into the land, whispered by the wind, carved in bark and memory. But this was different. Larger. Older. Designed to lead, not just symbolize. Clara stepped into its outer ring. The bear didn't stop her. Snow whispered beneath her boots as she moved, following the curve. The deeper she walked, the quieter the forest became. Like it was watching too, like it remembered every step she'd taken as a child, and every one she hadn't. By the time she reached the center, the world around her felt suspended. No birds. No rustling trees. Just stillness. And at the spiral's center lay a stone slab. Flat. Weathered. With shallow carvings across its surface. She brushed snow from the top. Spirals again, some incomplete, others interwoven. But in the middle, one word stood out. Carved deeper than the rest. Remain. She knelt. Touched the letters. The stone was cold, but not dead. It pulsed. Not physically, but somewhere deeper. A memory waiting to be unlocked. She closed her eyes. And it came. Not a voice. Not a vision. A feeling. Of Sam, huddled in this very place. Of fear, not of the bear, but of the world beyond the forest. Of men who didn't understand. Of memories that hurt too much to carry. She felt his choice. He hadn't been lost. He had stepped off the path, because it was the only place that had ever felt safe. And the bear hadn't led him here. He'd followed. Protected him. Stayed. Because he had been asked to. Clara's breath hitched. A soft crack sounded behind her. She turned. And saw the bear walking again, slowly, along a narrow path she hadn't noticed before. She stood and followed. This trail was different. The trees grew closer together. The snow thinned to patches. The air grew warmer. Not spring, just less cold. Like they were stepping through a pocket of time untouched by the world outside. After several minutes, they reached it. A cave. Low. obscured by underbrush. The entrance framed by two fallen trees, their trunks twisted like the spiral itself. The bear stepped aside. Clara hesitated, then ducked inside. The air changed immediately. Warmer. Still. Thick with the scent of pine and stone. Inside, the cave was shallow but wide. And at its center, a circle of drawings, etched into the stone walls. Some recent, others ancient. Spirals. Bears. Children. One image caught her breath. A child sitting beside a bear, both looking at a spiral on the ground. Underneath, carved in smaller letters, "He stays until the memory fades." She touched the drawing. And the world blurred. Memories that weren't hers flooded in. A child laughing in the snow, red coat trailing behind. A fire burning inside the cabin, shadows flickering against maps. A bear stepping into the clearing, slow and quiet, like time incarnate. Sam, alone but not lonely, whispering secrets into the forest floor. Clara, calling his name from the porch, never seeing the spiral just beyond the trees. The bear, returning each year, sitting in the snow, not to search, but to wait. She staggered back from the wall. The bear was seated at the cave's entrance now, blocking the cold, his head low in calm vigil. She looked around. Something glinted on the floor. A small tin box. She opened it. Inside was a photo. A Polaroid. Faded, but clear. Sam and Clara, maybe age 8 and 10, sitting on a stump. Behind them, unmistakable, the shadow of the bear at the tree line. And on the back, written in childlike scrawl, "See? He's always there." Clara pressed the photo to her chest. The cave wasn't a hiding place. It was a vault. For memory. For safekeeping. She stepped back into the light. The bear rose. Looked at her for a long moment. Then began walking once more, not into the deep woods, but up the ridge. Toward the final place she hadn't dared return. The overlook. Where Sam was last seen before the storm. Clara followed. The air thinned. The wind picked up. And somewhere deep inside, she felt something stirring loose. Not grief. Not loss. But readiness. Whatever came next, she wasn't here to mourn. She was here to understand. At the ridge's peak, the forest parted like curtains. Below lay the lake, still frozen. The ranger station a speck at its edge. The spiral clearing invisible now, but still there. Waiting. The bear sat at the edge. Silent. Still. Clara sat beside him. They didn't speak. Didn't move. They just watched the forest. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was outside something. She was within it. A part of its memory. Its spiral. Its promise. Clara didn't know how long she sat beside the bear on the ridge. Time no longer moved in minutes. It moved in moments, measured by breath, by wind in the trees, by the feeling of something unseen drawing nearer. The bear made no sound, yet his presence filled the space beside her like a warm silence. Not demanding. Just there. Down below, the lake glistened like glass beneath the winter sun. The spiral clearing remained invisible from this height, but Clara didn't need to see it to know it was there. Her heart felt its pulse now, not metaphorically, but viscerally. Like a drumbeat through the trees. Like memory echoing back through time. The bear turned his head, ears twitching. Then he stood. Faced the northern trail. A direction Clara had never taken. He began to walk. Clara followed. This path felt different. Wilder. Less defined. The trees grew tighter together, their branches heavier with snow. The air was thick, humming softly, not a sound, not a song, but something in between. It reminded Clara of something ancient. Something beneath language. They came to a frozen creek. The bear stopped at its edge. Clara crouched and touched the surface. It was solid, clear, and beneath the ice, she saw a line of smooth stones, placed intentionally in a spiral pattern, barely visible unless one was looking for them. Another memory embedded in the land. She stood and looked across the creek. There, in the shadow of a snow-covered pine, stood the figure again. Small. Wrapped in a pale coat. Not moving. Not beckoning. Just watching. Clara took a step forward. Then another. The bear didn't move this time. He remained behind, letting her go alone. She stepped onto the creek, boots pressing carefully into the ice. No cracks. No slipping. The figure remained. As she reached the far bank, the wind lifted. And a voice whispered. "You found him." Clara froze. The voice wasn't in her ears, it was inside her. Familiar. Not the voice of a child. Older now. Mature. Like her brother speaking not from the past, but from here. From now. The figure stepped back into the trees. Clara followed. The trail narrowed again. Then opened. Into a glade. At its center was a single tree. Twisted and wide, its roots above ground, spiraling like veins across the earth. At the base of the tree sat a small wooden box. Clara approached it slowly. Knelt. Lifted the lid. Inside were scraps of paper, each one folded, each one worn soft by time. She unfolded one. In Sam's handwriting. "If you read this, then you found him. And if you found him, you remembered." Tears blurred her eyes. She opened another. "I didn't leave. I just couldn't stay where people forgot." And another. "He remembers everything. That's why I stayed with him." Clara pressed the papers to her chest. The bear hadn't been a protector. He'd been a companion. To her brother. To the forest. To time itself. A soft crack behind her. She turned. And for the first time, he was there. Not a vision. Not a whisper. Sam. Older than she remembered, but still unmistakably him. His face calm. His eyes bright. He stepped into the clearing, not from a dream, but from the forest. From the real. Clara couldn't breathe. "Sam." He smiled. "You came back." She stepped forward, hands trembling. "How? Where have you?" He shook his head gently. "Here. The whole time." She looked around. The bear, he waited for you, Sam said, voice soft. "Because I couldn't." The moment folded around them like snow. There were no explanations. None needed. Only recognition. She stepped into his arms. And the forest sighed. A warm wind passed through the trees. The bear, still waiting at the edge of the creek, lifted his head. Sam pulled back. "There's something I want to show you." He took her hand. Led her toward the back of the glade. There, between the trees, was a small cairn, a pile of stones carefully arranged. Sam knelt. Took a final stone from his pocket. Set it on top. Then whispered. "Together." The wind shifted again. And for the first time, Clara realized she wasn't here to find her brother. She was here to join him. Not to stay in the forest forever, but to remember the parts of her she'd left behind. To bring them back. To carry them forward. She turned. The bear had vanished. But in his place, at the creek's edge, a single red ribbon floated on the breeze. She reached for it. It wrapped around her wrist. And the moment sealed. Not an ending. A beginning. They didn't speak for a long time. Sam stood with his hand resting lightly on the cairn. Clara watched him in silence, her pulse slowly beginning to match the rhythm of the forest around them, slow, sure, unbroken. The snow fell softer here, in long drifting threads, as if the sky itself had been waiting for this moment to unfold. He turned to her and smiled gently. "Do you want to see where I stayed?" Clara nodded. They followed a narrow trail deeper through the trees. Not far, no more than a few minutes. And there, tucked between two massive boulders, sat a small cabin. Nothing like the ranger station. This one was built by hand, logs shaped and stacked carefully, moss stuffed between cracks, a roof layered with thick bark and snow. A wooden wind chime hung beside the door, made of bones and antlers. It clinked softly in the breeze, echoing the sound Clara had heard earlier in the spiral clearing. Sam opened the door. Inside, it was warm. A small hearth glowed in the corner, its fire slow but steady. The room was simple, one bed, one table, a line of hand-drawn sketches pinned across the far wall. Clara stepped in slowly, her breath catching. The drawings were all of the bear. Dozens of them. In different postures, different times of day, different seasons. Sitting. Sleeping. Walking. Watching. Some were made by a child's hand. Others by someone older, more practiced. A life traced by observation. And devotion. "I watched him every day," Sam said softly. "He never left. Not once. Not even when I wanted him to." Clara turned. "Did you ever try to leave?" Sam's gaze lowered. "A few times. When I got older, I'd make it halfway to the lake, and he'd just be there. Sitting. Like he knew I wasn't ready yet. Like he was waiting for me to decide." He paused. "And then, he started waiting for you." Clara's chest tightened. "So all these years, you were safe," Sam said. "Not lost. Not scared. Just away." Clara looked around the cabin again. There were jars of dried herbs on the shelves. Bundled pelts. A rusted old compass. But everything was clean. Cared for. Lived in. "You survived," she whispered. "I remembered," Sam replied. They stepped back outside. The wind had died down. At the edge of the tree line, the bear had returned. Sitting. Still. Waiting. But this time, not for Clara. Not for Sam. He was simply present. Because his promise was almost fulfilled. Sam and Clara walked side by side through the snow. Their boots crunched in unison. The bear stood as they approached. Massive. Regal. Calm. Sam stopped a few feet away. Clara did the same. They didn't speak. But they both knew what came next. Clara stepped forward. Reached out. Pressed a hand gently to the bear's fur. It was coarse. Cold on the outside. Warm beneath. He didn't flinch. Didn't move. He simply accepted the touch. Then he exhaled, a deep, slow breath that shook his entire frame. Sam joined her, placed a hand over Clara's. Together, for the first time since they were children, they stood side by side, not watching the bear, but witnessing him. And then, the bear turned. Not away. Not to flee. But toward the spiral clearing. He walked with purpose. And they followed. Back through the trees. Back over the frozen creek. Back to the place where memory had waited. When they arrived, the glade was brighter. A shaft of sunlight broke through the overcast sky, landing directly in the spiral's center. The bear walked to it, stopped, and sat. Clara and Sam stood at the edge, watching. The forest held its breath. And then, from the trees, they emerged. Not people. Not spirits. But shadows of memory. Figures, glimpses of past moments, echoes of laughter, old footsteps. Children running through snow. A younger Sam chasing a fox. A younger Clara drawing in the dirt. Their father tending a fire. Their mother singing near the porch. All of it, for one brief second, real. Drawn to the spiral. Drawn to the bear. Drawn to completion. And then, like breath on a mirror, it faded. Leaving only the snow. And the bear. And the two of them. The bear rose. Clara knew, without being told. This was goodbye. Not death. Not departure. Just the end of his vigil. The promise kept. He turned to face them one last time. Lowered his head. And walked into the woods. No sound. No trail. Just gone. Clara didn't cry. She didn't need to. The forest was no longer holding its breath. And neither was she. Sam looked at her. Now you remember. She nodded. And now I can carry it. They turned together. And walked back, not to the ranger station. Not to the road. But to the beginning. They didn't speak as they left the clearing. The forest had quieted again, not with the hush of uncertainty, but the deep stillness of completion. The air no longer felt like a question. It felt like an answer. Every footstep they took back toward the old ranger trail felt like a kind of rebirth. Each branch they passed under seemed to lower with grace, like the trees themselves were bowing in acknowledgement. The spiral wasn't behind them. It was within them now. Sam led the way along a path Clara didn't recognize. It wasn't overgrown, yet it wasn't marked by signs or steps either. It felt carved by memory. Their memory. As they walked, Clara found herself noticing small details she'd once overlooked, the faint etchings on tree trunks, the thin red ribbons tied to branches high above, the tiny spiral carved into a fallen log. She realized Sam had been leaving a trail. Not to be found, but to be followed by someone who remembered what to look for. Someone like her. They passed the frozen creek again. And Clara paused. There, at its edge, was a small cluster of paw prints in the snow. Not from the bear. From something smaller. A fox. A rabbit. Maybe both. Beside the tracks was a spiral made of twigs. Not there before. Placed deliberately. Left for them. She looked back, but there was no movement behind them. Only the gentle sway of trees. The bear was truly gone. But his presence still shaped the forest, not just through footprints or fur, but through ritual. Through symbols that would outlast them all. By midday, they reached the ridge again, the same overlook where Clara had first sat beside him. From here, she could see the frozen lake, the ranger station beyond it, and far in the distance, The faint line of the road where she had parked her car days ago. She realized she had no idea how long she'd been here. The forest didn't keep time the way the world did. But now, she didn't care. Time had already given her back what she needed. Sam stood at the edge of the ridge and took a deep breath. "Do you remember," he asked, "the first time Dad let us hike alone?" Clara smiled. "You got lost for 3 hours." Sam laughed. "You cried the whole time." "No," Clara corrected, "you cried. I told you to follow the spiral. And you refused." He grinned. "Still stubborn, huh?" She looked at him. "You're the one who followed a bear into the woods and stayed there for 20 years. He shrugged. "Fair." They sat again. This time, not in silence. They talked. About their parents. About childhood. About the world beyond the trees. About the forest and its strange rhythm. Sam told her how he learned to listen to the wind, how he read the changes in snow patterns, how the bear taught him patience, not through instruction, but through presence. "He never left," Sam said again. "Not once. Even when I forgot myself, he stayed." Clara didn't respond right away. She reached into her coat, pulled out the red ribbon that had wrapped around her wrist. It was faded now, almost translucent. She tied it gently to the low branch of a nearby tree. The wind caught it, and for a moment it danced like a heartbeat. Sam stood. "It's time," he said. Clara nodded. They descended the ridge. At the base, the trail widened again. The trees grew thinner. And suddenly, they were standing at the edge of the ranger station clearing. The building was just as she remembered, shuttered windows, half-buried porch, the wind chime still hanging crookedly by the door. The past was still here. But it no longer hurt to see. They stepped onto the porch. Clara paused before opening the door. "Sam," she said quietly, "what happens next?" He looked at her for a long time. Then answered, "Whatever you choose." She pushed the door open. Dust swirled in the sunbeam. Everything was just as she had left it, but it no longer felt haunted. It felt remembered. Sam stepped inside behind her. He reached into a cabinet, pulled out a worn leather journal. Handed it to her. "I kept everything in here," he said. "Drawings. Notes. Stories. About the bear. About the spiral. About you." Clara held it like something sacred. Like a piece of the forest she could carry home. That night, they ate. As if the forest, too, was finally resting. They ate together. They laughed. They slept beneath thick blankets, the silence outside no longer frightening, only deep and alive. And as she drifted off to sleep, Clara thought she heard it. Not a roar. Not a whisper. Just a breath. Morning broke quiet and gray. Clara sat on the edge of the ranger station's porch, her fingers curled around a mug of tea steeped from herbs Sam had gathered seasons ago. The air smelled like pine and smoke. Somewhere nearby, water dripped from thawing icicles. She hadn't slept like this in years. Not without dreams, but without fear. And now, with the forest breathing steadily around her, the final question began to take shape: would she leave? And if she did, what would she carry? Sam stepped outside beside her. "You're thinking about going back," he said, not accusing, just observing. Clara nodded. "I have a life there. Work. A home. Friends who think I disappeared." Sam looked toward the trees. "The forest doesn't ask you to stay. Just to listen." She turned to him. And you? Will you stay? He shrugged. I'm not sure I belong anywhere else anymore. Not completely. A pause. But maybe now. I can visit. Cross both paths. Clara breathed deep. The bear was gone. But his presence still hummed in the branches. In the spirals left behind. And she realized something. It wasn't just about remembering. It was about witnessing, and then carrying that truth into the world. She stood. Walked out into the clearing. And began to gather stones. At the edge of the forest, where trail met snow, she placed them. One by one. In a slow, deliberate spiral. Each stone a memory. A choice. A promise. When she finished, Sam stood beside her, arms crossed, watching quietly. He smiled. You know, if someone finds this, they'll ask the same question we did, Clara finished. And if they listen, they'll find the answers. They stood in silence for a while. Then Clara picked up her bag, light, but full now with something that couldn't be weighed, a journal of drawings, a pendant from the fire ring, a red ribbon tied to her wrist, and memories that would never again be forgotten. At the forest's edge, she turned back one last time. Not to search, but to acknowledge. The trees swayed gently. A soft wind brushed her cheek. Like a hand. Or a goodbye. Sam stepped beside her, one hand on her shoulder. No matter where you go, he said, the spiral doesn't end. Clara nodded. It just gets wider. They smiled. Then she stepped past the threshold. Into the world. Hours later, she reached the road. Her car was still there. Dusty. Cold. Waiting like everything else. She slid inside and stared out at the tree line one final time. The forest had given her back her brother. And more than that, it had given her herself. Weeks passed. Then months. Clara returned to her work, but everything had changed. Her photographs became quieter. Slower. Full of light and space. She stopped trying to capture things. She began trying to understand them. In the spring, she published a small book. It wasn't about the bear directly. Or Sam. It was about the patterns in nature. The spirals in ice. The curves in fallen feathers. The way memory takes shape in the land. It was titled, Remain. The final page was a photo. Of a spiral made of stones. At the edge of a snowy forest. No caption. No explanation. Just the symbol. A year later, Clara returned. Not to search. But to tend the spiral. To add one more stone. To remind herself that some stories don't end, they continue. Each step outward, part of a larger design. One no longer shaped by grief. But by presence. And deep in the forest, long after she'd gone, a shape moved between the trees. Massive. Brown. Silent. Not watching. Not waiting. Just being. As he always had.